Peter Collignon, thank you so much for joining me. 3 infections of people who were at the Black Lives Matter rally just in Melbourne. Does that concern you?
Well, it is a concern because it's 3 people, I presume, out of 10 or 20,000. How many of them got that at the rallies or got it from friends or acquaintances, we don't know. But what it does show that there's maybe, that's the low level we've got in the community, about 3 people out of 10 or 20,000. And the importance of that, at least in Melbourne, it means the virus is obviously not eliminated. It's there as we might expect at low levels, but it just reinforces why we need to be really careful, do all the things we know that decrease the chance of COVID via droplets spreading from person to person, keeping our distance, etc., because we've got to assume the virus is there. We've got to assume it might be a bit more easily to be spread in winter, and we've got to do everything we can within reason to make the risk as low as is reasonable.
Now, the government says the latest person, the 3rd protester, wasn't infectious at the time of the rally, but they're going to test the friends of his who went with him to it. Now, why would they test them when they don't think he was infectious?
Well, normally, once a person develops symptoms, we assume they may have been infectious for maybe 48 hours beforehand. So on the presumption that his symptoms have just developed, that's why they were probably saying he wasn't infectious during the rally. But equally, he probably associates with the same friends. Maybe the friends gave it to him. And the incubation period can be up to 10 or 14 days. That's why we have the 14-day quarantine. So it's possible one of his friends gave it to him at the rally, and he's only developing the symptoms now. So that's why they look at all the close contacts, the people you have a lot to do with for a period of time before and after, just to try and find out, well, who gave it to who and when did they get it, because we want to actually make sure that other people aren't going to get it as well, and we track them all down.
Peter Collignon, for nearly 2 months, we've had the same low level of infections, bar a little spike just in the last couple of days in Victoria, in particular from people returning from overseas. So not so much community transmission, although that too. Yet we are only now, the government's still going ahead, the Victorian government's still going ahead saying they will release, loosen up some of the restrictions now. Other states have loosened them a little bit earlier in the piece. But if we've had the same level of infections for a couple of months, doesn't that indicate that some of these restrictions could have been released, eased up weeks ago?
Well, my own view is that, yes, a number of them could have been. There were a number of restrictions in place in a few places, like not being able to go fishing, not going outside, which were really low risk and didn't actually make biological sense re-getting or giving transmission. I mean, this virus mainly transmits inside when you've got poor ventilation, people close together. Now, a lot of those we're going to have to keep on, but a lot of the others were actually, I think, not needed. We've always had relatively low levels of community transmission here, and we can keep it that way, providing we do the right things. Some governments, and I think Victoria was particularly going for elimination, which I think, unfortunately, is unlikely. I think what we've achieved and what Australia has got, which is low-level community transmission, is the best we're going to get. We need to keep it that way, but not overdo the restrictions trying for elimination, which even if we got in some areas, it's so easy for the virus to come back, because even in Melbourne, we can see people in the hotels are getting it from the people returning. So it's just too easy for the virus to come back. And if we restrict too much, or too little, sorry, because people think it's eliminated and we try and go back to where we were a year ago, that's just waiting for it to come back and bite us really hard.
Well, on that point, the government, the federal government said that we might not be able to resume international travel, be allowed out of the country until next year. Given how many people are returning from overseas with the virus, do you think that's even possible? Is this something that we're going to have restrictions on international travel for a long, long, long time?
Well, I think we are going to have restrictions on international travel. The reality is this virus is everywhere and in quite reasonable numbers. You just look at North America, South America, Europe. And the trouble with developing countries, you really don't have an idea how much it's there. And also, it's not going to disappear for quite a while, 18 months, 2 years, if we get a safe and effective vaccine and we can vaccinate everybody in the world. So, it's going to be quite a while. So I think unless we have direct travel to a country where we know they have almost no virus or at levels at least as low as us, such as New Zealand, but presumably Korea, maybe Japan might get into that too. If you come back from any other area, I think you're going to have to go into 2 weeks of quarantine when you come back, because we don't want it introduced and spread within our community. And unfortunately, for quite a while, that's the case. In my own case, I would be very wary about travelling to Europe or North America until I see what happens during their next winter. So personally, I'm not planning on doing any overseas travel to Europe or America, even if I'm allowed to probably March or April next year at the earliest.
Thank you very much for your insights, troubling as they may be. Peter Collignon.
Thank you.